Probably it should be a tracked vehicle, kind of like a tank, because if you're going to travel to times when there were no paved roads, you'd have to be able to get around. But we decided to use the DeLorean automobile because of this joke that we had in the movie. When the time machine arrives in the past, the people who live in the farmhouse think that it's an alien spaceship.
Looks like an airplane without wings.
That ain't no airplane. Look.
A lot of people think that Back to the Future is a science fiction movie. A lot of people think it's a special effects movie. The fact is that there are only 31 or 32 special effects shots in the entire film. In discussing with our special effects people and our artists about what was time travel going to look like, we started coming up with, and they started coming up with all kinds of ideas. What is the space-time continuum going to look like when Marty's in a DeLorean? And all kinds of great big visual eye candy. And at a certain point, Bob and I looked at each other and said, you know, that's all bogus. We don't need any of that stuff. Time travel should be instantaneous. This is a story about people. It's not a story about hardware. The hardware is just what we use to make it believable. Mark Twain had the Connecticut Yankee get hit over the head and wake up in King Arthur's time. There's other stories where somebody wishes that they were in the past. And none of these things were interesting to us. We felt that if it was a machine that did it, then it was more believable than if it was a wish. Because we know that machines can do stuff, and we don't have any example of somebody wishing for something as crazy as this and ever having it come true. So the machine is just a way to make the idea of time travel believable.
The way I see it, if you're going to build a time machine into a car, why not do it with some style? Besides, the stainless steel construction made the flux dispersal. Look out!
The script is something that's always changing. And what seems like a great idea one day, you might wake up and think it's not such a good idea the next day. Or more likely, you have a great idea, and then the next day or the next week you come up with an even better idea.
1.21 gigawatts! Tom, how am I going to generate that kind of power? It can't be done, can it?
We had this idea for a nuclear explosion actually being the element that was required to bring Marty back from 1955 to 1985, and we had him go into Nevada to this nuclear test site. It turned out that the expense of that whole sequence was going to cost $1 million, which was a lot more money in 1984 when we were making the movie than it is today. But we couldn't afford it.
Marty, I'm sorry, but the only power source capable of generating 1.21 gigawatts of electricity is a bolt of lightning.
So we put on our thinking caps, and we came up with something that turned out to be far, far better than what this nuclear thing would have been. It kept it all contained in Hill Valley. It kept the clock imagery and the time metaphor much more in the movie. And it was a vastly better sequence than that nuclear test site could have been.
We originally wrote the project for Columbia Pictures, who put it into turnaround. And this was in the early 80s, and the average teen film in the early 80s was very R-rated. And they were sort of drinking, drugging, sex comedies, and those were the films that were making a lot of money. So most of the studios, when we went to set the film up, thought that the film was too soft because it didn't have a lot of edgy stuff in it, except for Disney, who thought that because of the relationship with the son and the mother, it was too dirty.
Do you mind if we park for a while?
That's a great idea. I'd love to park.
Huh? I could see how it would be troubling on paper to people, the idea of a boy and his mother kind of having that kind of relationship. But so much around it was so sweet and so accessible and so engaging. And the intent was not salacious. The intent was not pandering. It wasn't meant to be, you know, gratuitously titillating.
I think a man should be strong so he can stand up for himself and protect the woman he loves.
And Leah, you know, was so brilliant because Leah just played it like this girl. I mean, she wasn't carrying around the whole mother thing in her head when she was playing it. She was playing what this girl might have felt, when this kind of mysterious